Welcome into Roll Illini here on WPGU 1071 UPTV. We are superstars here today. Of course, UPTV is here, and even the Utilized Public Affairs is here. Emily Polk is filming me and all of us here. James Will Gerard, Jason Liggett. I guess he ditched the camera for a bit. Smart idea, man.
It's all right. We have a different camera person in the
Yeah.
studio
Right.
today. We've replaced you, Jason.
To clarify, while these two knuckleheads try to, berate Jason, he's at his other job. He's not just ditching us, okay? Gosh, show some
No.
loyalty.
We love Jason. He is just a busy guy, so we wanted to make sure the camera work is taken care of on all sides. So we're doing the filming for him, which is just fine.
Little subtle jabs. Subtle jabs.
No, we love Jason. But anyways, we also love some Illinois Adaptive Athletics news. Got a lot of stuff today going on. Boston Marathon happened last weekend. London happening Sunday. Oh my gosh, what a turnaround. And then we've got an interview with the president of the National Winter Basketball Association. Woo! And then we've got, Chris Raschke. He's the president of the juniors division of the NWBA, also an alum of the university. So we'll be talking with him. And of course, we always have fun stuff to talk about, like our cool wristbands and all of that. But first, we have the Boston Marathon. Most pressing right now. Quickest marathon, or a really quick turnaround for the athletes from Boston to London. James, tell me, I know you've done some running. What's that like on the quick turnaround?
The recovery time for them is very crucial. Obviously, they train and they're used to putting their bodies through it, but at the same time, it's not just having to go out and compete again. It's like, going across the pond on a plane, and then having some downtime to kind of recover. And it's trying to find that balance between relaxing, but also preparing, because you don't want to over-prepare to the point where you're tired before you're going into, your marathon. And even then, your body's still going to be a little tired just from putting yourself through that, especially through this year's Boston Marathon, where it was just not the greatest conditions at all.
So tell us about that.
So, Tatiana McFadden came in first, fifth Boston Marathon champion for her, not champion, title for her, which is obviously pretty remarkable. First one since, I believe, 2016? Yes. Won 4 straight from 2013 to 2016, and one just came back and won her fifth last year. She was not at 100%. But yeah, coldest race conditions in 30 years.
She didn't win last year. She got 4th.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying she came back and won. Won this year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, coldest race temperatures in 30 years. She won the slowest time in 30 years. And honestly, if anybody saw the video from any division of the Boston Marathon, it was just the worst.
Yeah.
Being a track and field athlete, the elements are a part of it, but you never sign up for things like that. It was raining, super windy.
Yes.
But obviously, she came out on top.
Yeah, so obviously the slowest Boston Marathon in 30 years, but that came with some treacherous conditions. So there was black ice leading up to the marathon. There was rain, there was wind, and the athletes were just not prepared for the cold weather. In fact, they were at times wrapped up in garbage bags to stay warm.
A little poncho.
Yes. I'm not a big poncho guy, but whatever helps. So they were not ready, and as a result, to some slick roads and some rain and wind and everything else, Amanda McCrory had to pull herself out of the race, which is quite an interesting thing because you hear that Tatiana is competing, you hear that all these other big names are competing, but where's Amanda McCrory?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I kept searching, frantically, where did, typing in
Yeah.
Boston Marathon, where did she finish and her division. And I was like, what is going on? Like, did she just, because I was in the impression that she competed. And I'm like, she couldn't have done this bad. Like, what's going on? So obviously I went to her Twitter page, and that's when I read that she had pulled out. So
Yeah, so from her Twitter page, I'll just read that she writes, disappointed to announce that I pulled out of the Boston Marathon due to inclement weather conditions and concern for my health. After nearly 100 marathons in my career, this will be my first ever did not start, or DNS.
that's,
Letting
I
that
mean,
soak
obviously
in.
she was not happy about that, but that stat right there, her first, non-start in over 100 marathons it shows that she's dedicated to it. So no one's questioning that.
Right,
And
of course
obviously,
not.
her safety comes first.
Yeah.
For the marathon, and even though it is the Boston Marathon,
Yeah.
gotta have limits to certain things.
Right, so I know one thing we were talking about in the lead up to the show was that she has been discussing publicly on her social media accounts of finding a balance between working hard and having fun, which I think is something we can all relate to
Yeah, I mean,
slightly.
you want to be the best, but then being the best, you have to pay
Yeah.
a significant cost. You have to
Right.
make a lot of sacrifices. I'm sure
Yeah.
there was times when Tatiana and Jane Driscoll and Jeff George or
Josh George.
Josh George. I'm sorry,
Jeff George is
I'm
the
still in-
quarterback. Very
oh,
similar
I'm
names.
still in Illini.
both Illini guys.
I don't want to talk about that, George. But anyways, they have to sacrifice so much to be great, and obviously it gets to that point where every athlete goes through it eventually, where you get to the point where you just don't want to do it anymore. And I don't know if she's contemplating that. I'm not going to speculate for her,
Right, yeah.
I'd imagine it's because of the conditions.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear how she was feeling health wise too. Maybe she was a little under the weather or something.
but we'll see.
Can we call her right now?
Yeah, let's just give her a ring
Give her
during
a
the
ring?
commercial break. You know,
I mean, she's what,
shoot her a message.
7 hours ahead of us? Call her.
Hey, but we'll see. Like then, that's another thing. Since the quick turnaround, the speculation ends kind of quickly. If
Right.
she comes out and has a great performance in London, no one's going to be asking about race conditions, how she's feeling, her future, things like that. But that's what kind of happens when you pull out.
Right. Yeah, no, I think she'll be just fine. I think if she was wanting to take a step back in her career, then she would have not traveled to
Right.
Boston.
Right.
Otherwise, that's just a waste of money. On a lot of aspects. So, Amanda McClure is not done. She and Tatiana are in London right now. Tatiana just tweeted a picture not too long ago of her eating ice cream, so of course she is there. I feel like I am ESPN giving the play-by-play of LeBron's big decision here. He's now eating at Denny's, but Tatiana is not eating at Denny's just yet. But anyway, so they are in London. Marathon is Sunday. Should be an interesting marathon. I do have high expectations, of course, for Tatiana, and I kind of expect Amanda to push Tatiana. I don't know why.
I feel like Amanda's got like an extra chip on her shoulder now during
Yeah.
this race. She's really got to prove herself to everyone, and maybe not competing in the Boston Marathon will be to her benefit. Maybe
I
she'll
was
be a
going to
little
say that,
fresher.
yeah. I mean, her body isn't going to be as tired. It's not going to have as many miles, literally miles on it. So, but one thing I do want to point out, we talked about this before the show. We've heard about Desiree Linden winning the Boston Marathon. And as I Google it here, it says, first U.S. woman to win since 1985.
So you got some tea to spill then.
Yeah, so one, if anybody didn't know, Tatiana McFadden is a woman. Two, she is American. And I think this is just I don't think this is a malicious type of thing, but I think it's a perfect example of how the media kind of overlooks wheelchair athletics. Because
Sure.
technically, Desiree Linden is the first women's Boston Marathon winner in the able-bodied division. But as we already talked about, Tatiana's won 5 times within the last, 7 years. So that needs to be said. I feel like that should be said. And it's almost surprising that it happened to her in a sense because she's the biggest I feel like Paralympic figure almost as far as her Nike branding,
She
Team
really
USA.
is,
She's
yeah.
everywhere, and they still got it wrong. So
Sure.
that makes me mad.
Yeah, I totally get the perspective of Tatiana is female winning in Boston. I get it. However, I think maybe from their perspective, Boston Marathon's perspective, they're referring to able-bodied athletes, the runners, and they're not in the same class as Tatiana McFadden. I mean, you could bend it a little bit, but just the reality is, unfortunately, they're just not competing together. But still, Tatiana's time is much better. Which is
the nature of what she's doing.
Yeah, she's just better, okay? No, I know there's always a question of, well, how do these wheelchair athletes compete? Or how do their times match up against a runner?
A lot faster. Long story
so
short.
the wheelchair racers are faster because they can fly down a hill. They don't have to worry about pushing. They can conserve their energy. Yeah.
But I still think, to a certain extent, you gotta respect the greatness. I'm sure we all in this room at least do, but respect the greatness of whatever division. I mean, when you say Boston Marathon winner, I don't care what division it is.
I mean, you can look at the wall in the studio right over there where Gene Driscoll signed your name. We see all those Boston Marathon championships.
Exactly. And then I was actually having this discussion with one of my friends. You don't get to just go to the Boston Marathon. Like the Illinois Marathon, we could just sign up for the Illinois Marathon and go run it. And well, kind of, sort of, not the full marathon, but we can do that and mess around and just. But you don't get to just sign up for Boston. You have to qualify for that, and then to win it, that's pretty incredible for anybody in any division.
On that note, I think we'll take a quick break and come back with some NWBA action, Nationals, and Chris Rathje. And, of course, we're going to introduce you to the term parapets. What? We're right back for more.
And we're back here on Rolling Illini. This is producer man Will Gerard alongside James Boyd, and we are talking to Chris Rathje, president for the junior division of the National Wheelchair Basketball Association, former U of I alum, basketball player on the team. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you guys for reaching out to me.
Just to start this out here, as we talked about a little before the interview, could you kind of give our listeners out there just your background with the university? I know you graduated in 2004.
Well, I started attending Champaign camps when I was a teenager, when I was in high school, probably about 15 years old, maybe a little younger than that even. And then I started attending. I graduated high school in May of 2000, and by June of 2000, I was in summer school down in Champaign and spent 4 great years learning a lot about myself at Champaign, and then I come back and root for the team and help out at summer camps when I can now. So really learned a lot, and I have a lot of great friendships and relationships with people all around Champaign.
Yeah, one thing we've talked about on the show a couple times is the summer camps that the wheelchair basketball program holds over the summer. I mean, you told us that you started going when you were 14 or 15 years old. I mean, what do those camps mean to you, and what can you say about that camp environment?
Oh, I mean, the camp environment was just wonderful. The coaching level at the juniors has gotten much higher over the last 15 years, but when I was first attending camps, I mean, I didn't have many opportunities, did a lot of great coaching, and so, you only get that few-day crash course, but you go to enough of the few-day crash courses over the course of your career, and you start getting better, and you just learn and become a better player. I mean, I honestly didn't know how to pick and seal, which is some of the most fundamental skills on offense, but I didn't know how to do that before I attended U of I camp.
So, this is James, by the way. How big was it for you to be able to play college basketball? I think I was reading an article earlier that said you weren't able to play in high school.
Well, I was able to play in high school, but one of the things that I helped with was establish the IHSA program. At the time that we established the IHSA program, I was the only player from Illinois, so that's probably the article that you read. I couldn't play on my high school team. I had to go to downtown west side of Chicago to go play because there was no elite level 10-foot teams in the suburbs. But playing in college was just incredible. Just all the experiences of playing team sports. You don't get to experience that playing on a high school club team. It's not quite the same. You're not on the bus. You don't get to see people every day. You don't get to build those relationships at practice and just those bonding. I mean, honestly, probably my fondest memories are still just, getting to be around the guys and the camaraderie of having these mutual relationships and mutual experiences. And, I still get to see people because people are playing all over the country, for their different teams where they've now moved. It's pretty awesome. I think I saw the most Illini I've seen in one place in quite a few years just this past Nationals.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So you talked about relationships and the camaraderie you had. So what was it like playing for Coach Mike Frogley?
It was incredible. He's the best X's and O's coach I've ever been around, and he's just so smart. And one of the reasons he's so smart, and I don't think I appreciated when I was younger, was that so many people are just willing to say, well, you're this kind of player or you're that kind of player, and they're willing to put a cap on how good you can be. And Coach Frogley is not about that at all. He's all about reaching your maximum potential. So he's already putting you in a mental space of, let's get better, let's improve. I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do. You go out there and work and prove what you can and can't do. So that's such a huge thing in any sport, in any endeavor, really, is you never want to cap off, well, I can do this, or I'll only be able to do this, because you're already defeating yourself. What he always was talking about was maximizing potential. And with that occurring, you're always going to reach higher if you always think, well, where can I go? Not limiting where you might go or not go.
Yeah, producer man Will Gerard speaking again. While we're on the subject of coaches, I have to ask: you met Matt Bushy when he was a freshman and you were a senior. I mean, what was it like having him as a teammate?
Oh, I loved having Bushy as a teammate. Something I will always remind him is that his first year in college, first game actually, we were playing a team that wasn't very good. So I got to start the game, which was pretty unusual, and he got to start as well. And so my goal as a low-pointer player was I was going to get him as many points in the game and get him confidence. So I would go on one side of the court and work with him, and I will let him know that he scored 24 points in his first game as a college player, and I feel very responsible for that. Picking and sealing, making sure he gets those close baskets. And he's just a wonderful guy, always had a smile on his face, always brought a great energy to the team, and he brings a lot of the same things as a coach.
Can you kind of tell us a bit about your time around Stephanie Wheeler, who was recently inducted into the Hall of Fame? I mean, I know she's someone who's just a year older than you, so I'm sure you guys encountered one another quite a lot.
Well, yeah, Steph's a perfect example of she didn't let anything limit herself. She just kept working and working, and it was awesome to see her improve it for the 5 years that she was at Illinois. And then after she was at Illinois, she helped establish the program at Alabama, and she kept getting better and better. And that was during the very strong run for the women's national team. She won a gold medal with the team in Athens, and then she won a gold medal and was an even more dominant force for their run when they won a gold in Beijing. And then she came back to Illinois, and she was national team coach when the team just won gold in Rio. And to my knowledge, because one of the Hall of Fame members mentioned it when I was down in Louisville, I believe she's the youngest Hall of Famer ever. So pretty exciting news for her.
Yeah, wow, that's actually incredible.
Just to kind of go off on a quick tangent, I just wanted to let you know that also Coach Mike Frogley was also named a Hall of Famer during Louisville. So it's been quite a weekend for Illinois, having two people go into the Hall of Fame.
I'm surprised that he's just now being inducted, given a lot of his accomplishments in the sport.
Sometimes all it takes is people to nominate it. So it was a very strong Hall of Fame class.
Sorry,
go ahead.
So kind of going off what you just said, what's it like when it all kind of comes full circle where you see your former teammates and former fellow students getting inducted to the Hall of Fame. They're coaches now. You're with NWBA. So what is that like to just kind of see the journey come all the way around?
It's not really something I sit down and think about all that much because I'm busy doing what I'm doing, trying to just make the junior division as good as I can make it and make it as strong as I can make it, fix some of the rules that need fixing, and just trying to make the experience for the current junior players the best I can. The one thing I will say is that, as part of being a student athlete under Coach Frogley, and then also I got to know Dr. Nugent when he was alive and met him several times, and just how much he cared for people. He was not about basketball. He was about helping people and letting people grow and letting them know how strong and capable they were. But as part of all of that was that we were expected to give. We were expected to push this whole society forward. And it's just neat to see so many different coaches and so many different board members and so many different executives all within the NWBA. There's such a strong percentage of Illini graduates, and it's exciting to see how we've all kind of, it's not like we've stayed in one little area. We're all kind of doing different things, and we're on teams from Los Angeles to New York and a lot of other places in between. So it's really neat to see how Illinois kind of spreads its wings, if you will, in our community.
All right, and then I know you talked about briefly on your role with the NWBA, but what's it been like? I guess being a little removed from the national tournament. What was the national tournament like, and how much work is it to just get that thing going, and what is it like during the weekend?
Oh, it's intense. Probably the most intense weekend I've had. First year as president, first year on the the tournament working group that planned it. So I had been involved, but not quite to the same level, being vice president. And it is an intense blur. It's getting up at 5 in the morning, getting to the gym at 6:30 or so, and not leaving until the last game's done at 8 o'clock or thereabouts. So it's some long days, and it's intense, and you're not quite sure what day of the week it is, and everything seems to be moving fast and slow at the same time, and just trying to make sure that all the things are taken care of. Running 12 courts at the same time. I was responsible for the junior division, so we had 3 different tournaments going on. Each tournament had 32 games over the course of 3 days, and then we had 3 different showcase games as well. So that means that I was responsible for 48 teams and 99 games in 3 days. So never experienced anything quite like it.
I know this is definitely a weighted question, but for our listeners out there, what outcomes should they know about that took place during the national tournament?
I realize that this is an Illinois-focused show. For Illinois, very excited. Peoria, which is your closest junior team, finished 8th in the nation, which is their highest finish ever. They have a player on their team named John McNamara, who I believe his father is a professor at University of Illinois, and he made a second all-tournament team, and I believe he's headed to Illinois next year as a freshman. And then there's a player named Gabe on Grand Rapids who won the NIT, so basically they got 17th place, and he won the MVP of that tournament. He's also headed to Illinois. We had another first-teamer all-tournament named Miles Hill out of North Carolina. He's headed to Illinois. And then to wrap up the Illinois recruiting class, there's a player named Ben who played for the Toronto men's team, who is also headed to U of I next year. So a very strong recruiting class coming for Coach Bushy. And then it was just a really exciting tournament. Our rankings are made by an 8-person ranking committee, and this is the first year we used that format, and it seemed to really work. Our prep division, which is our 14 and under division, 13 and under division. The top 5 teams we knew were going to be really close together, and they, like we said, those few games were all very close. And the number 3 seeded team out of Charlotte ended up winning it fair and square out of some really intense games. And then Houston in the varsity division, which is high school graduation and under. They were the dominant team all year, and Atlanta, who was the number 2 seeded team, gave them a really good game in the championship game, but they finished their season undefeated. And the crazy thing about that is they didn't have any starters that were seniors, so they will be back next year.
One quick follow-up question here is, would you like to share with our listeners what Illinois head coach Matt Bushy was doing during the tournament? And along those lines, I mean, how did he look?
Okay, well, Illinois coach Matt Bushy was a player. He was playing on the Division III Indianapolis Pacers, and they ended up winning their Division III championship. And as well, Coach Bushy was first-team all-tournament for the Division III tournament. Unfortunately, because I was so busy with the juniors, I did not get to see Coach play at all. But I heard about how he was doing from his own point of view, and I think he was pretty happy with he played well. And then he has a gentleman on his team named Kyle Kilworth, who was the MVP of the tournament. So I think he did some good strategizing on the floor while he was playing, and they won Division III, so they'll be moving up to Division II next year.
All right. I know you talked about a lot of different programs there. So one of the questions I kind of ran by you before the show is, how do the teams get chosen, and how does the seeding go? Is there like a national ranking all year? What is that like?
Right. We had a ranking committee for the first time ever, where we've had ranking committees before, but they're not quite as formal as this one. It was an 8-person ranking committee, and we have 6 conferences in the junior division, so we had at least one representative from every junior conference in the country. And what's really helpful is, especially if you're not a very strong junior team, you tend to not travel outside of your region, so it's really important that we have representation in every region to kind of figure out what's best. And I got to say, at least from how the rankings went, we had the top 8 in the varsity division finish in order, and then we had top several in prep finish in order. So it obviously, the ranking committee worked. And we were doing rankings all year long, and obviously, as you get to the conference championships in February and March, that makes it our job easier, because just more teams are playing more games, and you have more data points to try to figure out who's really the best and so forth.
All right, so how have you seen the national tournament grow over the years, and why do you think it's important for these players and in wheelchair basketball to get this kind of exposure?
Oh, the national tournament has grown leaps and bounds since I've been around. The first nationals I ever went to was in 1995. And we only had 13 teams in the top division, so we couldn't even have a full 16-team bracket. And then we had little four teams for our prep division. Now we have a 32-team tournament for, 2 16-team tournaments for our varsity division, a top 16, 1 through 16, and then our NIT, which is 17 through 32. And then we have a full... This is just a new thing within the last 3 years, where we've had enough prep teams that we can have a full 16-team bracket for the prep teams. This was our first year where we had 20 teams apply to come to prep nationals. So, that's just a huge thing. When we were begging, just 4 or 5 years ago, we were begging teams to come to our prep nationals, and now, unfortunately, we had to say no to four of those teams. It's just huge. I think anytime you want your program and you want your kids in your program to move forward, it's important for them to have exposure to whatever that next level is. So, if you're not quite ready for nationals, but you get an invitation, I tell people go, because that helps them kind of get that image in their mind of what nationals is, and they get to see teams that are currently at where they want to go. And so forth. So, like, even if you're a team that qualifies for nationals, like, what's that next level? Like, do you want to be elite? Well, you need to go see what the elite teams are doing. And I think one of the things we talk about in wheelchair basketball is, I think nationals is the number one place where people, quote unquote, catch the bug. There's a certain vibrancy to national. There's a certain energy that's just not going to be found at any other tournament. It's just such a large scale thing, and you can see anything from prep to the most elite Paralympians and everything in between. It's pretty fascinating, and I believe I heard someone say over the weekend that it was the largest single event, adaptive athletic event anywhere in the world, because 96 teams play in the sport. I know it's the largest wheelchair basketball tournament ever, but I mean, that's just a huge amount of people and over 1,000 athletes. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, while we're on the subject here of the growth you've seen in the sport, I mean, as president for the junior division, what do you have planned to kind of, increase exposure, get more younger athletes involved in the game?
We increase exposure by we just keep pushing to get more teams. Especially a place for growth, I find is, we only have 30 prep teams as compared to 50 varsity teams. So I'd love to see that prep number go up and up and up. And I'm already kind of I'm in discussions with a couple different areas who've never had prep teams before, and I'm trying to convince them, well, next year's the year. And same thing, with varsity, one of those things that the NWBA kind of suffers, and a lot of nonprofits for that matter, finances is a finite resource. So just trying to find new avenues to get money to build teams and build the Nationals as a whole. So trying to come up with new ideas is always exciting. And even though this isn't quite what we're talking about here, I'm very excited that College Nationals next year will be held at the State Farm Center in Champaign.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I cannot wait for that event. I know both James and Ryan will be gone, but hopefully they'll be able to come back for that tournament. One last little follow-up question here. Along those lines of what you spoke of, I mean, would you say that the biggest obstacle most areas encounter when they're trying to establish a program is just purchasing like the proper equipment for athletes? Is that kind of the main obstacle, just getting those financial resources together?
I mean, a chair is a huge investment, right? It's back when I was a player, it was $2,000 to $3,000, and just as inflation goes, and the chairs get even more complex, it's probably $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. I mean, that is a huge expense. A lot of times you can get a loaner chair, but that won't fit somebody the same way. I mean, can you imagine trying to, hey, Will, let's go try playing a basketball game, or let's go try running a marathon, but these shoes are going to be 2 sizes too big, or even worse, 2 sizes too small. So that is a huge thing, but usually, we can find a loaner chair for a kid. I think another huge expense is just you have to have adults on board that are willing and committed to travel the long distances. I was talking to a father who said, I have to drive 3 hours each way on a Saturday to go to practice. He was in an area that didn't have a team, and to get to an area that had a team, it was 3 hours each way. And then also, I mean, just not only the gas expense to get to practice, but just the expense to get to and from tournaments. I would say that's probably the biggest thing. And as someone that's pretty high up in the organization, I try my best to get into people's different ears about trying to raise money, and you get to a certain point, but then you get turned down because they want to spend money on cancer research or whatever else, and it's kind of hard to say anything after that. We do a lot of great things, but resources are finite, and so you keep pushing and hoping that I can find new avenues for next year.
Yeah, thanks again for speaking with us. Just to kind of conclude this interview on a positive note, I mean, would you like to share with us a bit, what your vision is for what wheelchair basketball may look like one day, because of the work that you're putting in right now?
Well, it's going to be hard to say what wheelchair basketball will be in the future. You never want to put limits on what it could be. I would have never imagined it would have been 12 courts, a 12-court national. That's amazing. But one thing that really made me excited and a little bit emotional was for the first 24 years of our junior division, we had no classification, whatever. whatsoever. It was just open. So as long as you proved that you had a minimal disability, you just throw 5 kids out there. And it was not a great situation because there was a lot of lower function players. So, like, I know you guys are aware of basketball classification. So there was a lot of Class 1s and a lot of Class 2s that, depending on what team you were on, you never saw the court. And I just was like, no, that's not right. So what I got passed was a simplified classification. It's much simpler than what the adults do, but at least it's something. And just to see that those 4th players out there, those 5th players out there are some of the lower function players, and also along with that is we're getting more girls, more playing opportunity. It was exciting and kind of emotional for me to see that in the national. So we'll see what the next several years bring, but I'm sure it'll be awesome. And we just want to keep pushing forward and getting more teams so that more kids have opportunities.
Yeah, I know that was that was a big question to drop on you, but I'm glad to hear that more people in general are just getting involved in the game that may have not had access to it, maybe a decade or two ago.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being willing to talk to us.
And this will conclude our interview with Chris Rathje, president for the junior division of the National Wheelchair Basketball Association. We'll be back after a short commercial break here on Rolling Illini on WPGU.
Welcome back to Rolling Illini here on...
Do they always catch you mid-word or mid-breath whenever you come back on air?
I'm full breath now.
It's like you're always holding your breath in between breaks, and then we come back on air, and you're like, I can breathe again.
Well, thank you to Chris Rathje for joining us for that segment. Now we'll jump to the Spurlock Museum with Will Gerard. Will, tell us what was going on yesterday. Wow, days fly by. What was going on yesterday at the Spurlock Museum where Adam Blakeney and Stephanie Wheeler were talking?
Well, Ryan, yesterday evening I got the opportunity to go over to Spurlock to watch a TED Talk. I believe it was considered a TED Talk where it was Stephanie Wheeler and Adam Blakeney were talking, and they kind of, for the audience that was there, didn't know much about para-athletics at the university, so a lot of the focus was just explaining to the people there in attendance about the background behind the program. The presentation started with... early on with both of them speaking about how the para-athletic movement, the term didn't exist back then, it exists now, first came to the university when primarily due to the efforts of Tim Nugent and the focus being on returning veterans and those that were rehabilitating and also giving them, those that with impairments, the opportunity to compete in sport. They talked about the early days at Galesburg, and they didn't get too much into the specifics, but after that, both of the coaches kind of gave the audience just a rundown of the accomplishments of both the programs who are storied, really. I mean, Adam spoke of how if you look at the medal count during most Paralympic Games, there are tons of Illini that always make an appearance, and you see it during the marathons as well, with racers that we've already talked about on the show today. I mean, and then, on the other hand, Stephanie got the chance to kind of just address how basketball has been had such a big presence on this campus, and even in terms of how she's the coach of the women's team, just how Illinois was not only the first school to have a wheelchair basketball team, but they were also the first school to have a women's wheelchair basketball team later. So it was a very
big thing.
It was a real thorough discussion. It was enlightening. I enjoyed it a lot, and I hope that those talks continue because as I mentioned to Stephanie when I bumped into her briefly today,
Is she okay?
She is. Yes, I saw her just for a few minutes.
You didn't,
she was
run
heading out of dress. We didn't actually literally run into each other. I was sitting at a table, and she was on her way out, and I told her, I was like, this is great. It was fantastic. I feel like it was educational for those in attendance, and I think there are so many other people on this campus who would be able to do a great presentation. Really get into some specific things about the history of para-athletics on campus.
Yeah. So with people present asking questions, what, from your perspective, was their kind of assumption about Paralympic sports? What did they think?
It seemed like most of them they're fairly open-minded, but they did have questions regarding just the future of para athletics in terms of, we talked about on the show as well, but getting a little bit more recognition, having increased involvement on campus, whether it be through intramural activities, if there was intramural wheelchair basketball at the ARC per se, or, but it was a wide range of questions. I mean, there were some questions just kind of going into the specifics of how the programs are run. One question someone asked, how do you guys recruit? And both coaches, kind of had the opportunity to talk about how it's important for them to recruit student athletes who, one, will qualify for the university, but two, also are, productive citizens and those people that they would like to see represent the campus. So one anecdotal thing that Adam mentioned was how at one point in time there was an athlete who he was recruiting that was one of the most talented athletes he'd ever seen, but when it came down to some things off of the track, they weren't. His coaching staff wasn't really willing to extend that offer because of it. So there really is a focus on making sure that there are quality people coming to play here.
Yeah. So even as you had mentioned, Will, during the break, we talk a lot about wheelchair this, wheelchair that, but the reality is it's basketball. It's track.
And that was one other thing that Adam said I thought was really cool was someone asked him a question about, for him coaching, what it's like in terms of the fact that he coaches some people who are just competing in their first 5K, whereas he's also training Tatiana McFadden, who's one of the best marathoners in the world. And he kind of, he compared it to how, like, whenever you're on a marathon, you're all competing against one another, really. And he really enjoys just having the opportunity to see people, achieve their goals no matter what they are, and just kind of along those lines too. Another major topic, and this is kind of getting back to your question about eliminating the wheelchair. Part of it is people. One thing they talked about is a lot of people see the wheelchair and they don't see the athlete, and part of that is maybe just because of the way that it's promoted, or maybe just because people don't have enough exposure to it. But really, that one major point that both the coaches tried to make was that a wheelchair is a piece of athletic equipment, just as tennis shoes are for a basketball player, or a baseball bat is for someone that plays baseball.
Interesting. So I'm sitting on a $50,000 piece of sporting equipment then.
I don't know if
Nice.
how much sporting you do yourself, but it is.
I don't do any.
You will soon.
See that 40-yard dash speed. I'll tell you what, Ryan.
2 miles an hour.
Man, when he pulled up that very first day with me, I tell you, he might have been running about a 4.2. the agility, the swiftness of the movements.
Yes, and talking about our speed, of course, in 2 Saturdays, April 28th, we'll be in the Illinois Marathon 10K, the Cerebral Palsy Foundation and Illini Media Company raising funds for everybody and raising awareness. Of course, they're all good buddies of us. Illini Media is our parents' company, and the Cerebral Palsy Foundation out of New York helps people kind of live their life and helps support research to allow doctors and families to identify cerebral palsy at a younger age than it currently is found at. So again, that's next in 2 Saturdays. Thank goodness it's not tomorrow, because I couldn't do it then. But Willie talked about immersive technology. Here's a secret. Won't be a secret anymore. But we just branched this morning. Breaking news. Oh my gosh. We got a relationship with the Center for Teaching. I don't even know what the place is called. Man. Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning at the U of I here in the Armory. They're going to help us out with some GoPro footage, 360 footage, VR stuff for the marathon. We talk about my $40,000, $50,000 chair. We'll be sticking a mount to my chair with some 360 camera stuff.
You'll get a real intimate view of that piece of sporting equipment.
Yes,
and the person in it, too.
You get to stare at me for an hour.
Oh, brother.
I can't even do that. It's okay. So we'll cut it down to 3 minutes. But
That's why it's 360. So you have the option of looking.
You have the option to not look at me, but you really should. Okay, you know where your priorities are. So we'll be doing that, of course. In 2 Saturdays, we'll be bringing in a tech assistant. The name is TBD, but whoever that is, we will introduce you all to that person, because they'll be responsible for making sure we're all good to go and I don't hit a pothole in the GoPro Fusion or whatever it is goes crazy.
I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll be okay. And on that fun note, of course, feel free to visit our social media accounts for our campaign page. Please do donate or even buy a shirt with our logo on it. That's a thing too.
You can find that link on our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter at
Facebook
Rolling
and
Illini.
Twitter.
Check out our nice, funny promo video. that we did.
Yes, we did a promo video on Wednesday. I got ripped for it. 6-pack now, but we did our...
Big shout out to GMI for allowing that.
Yes, Good Morning Illini let us do a video that aired this morning. Thank you, James, for producing that. And so we just kind of ran you guys through what it's like to train for a 10K.
We've been doing a lot of training.
Man.
And
Way too much training.
we put an asterisk by everything that we just said because, I mean,
Have you guys done any training, like, really?
No.
I mean-
I might hit the track once or twice before we do the run. We'll see.
I've been
I mean,
training all
I
my
haven't-
Time
life.
allows.
I haven't trained since high school, so it's been a while. I haven't ran in 3 years, so
I've been training my entire life for this.
I'm just hoping to
22
keep up
years.
with you guys, really.
It'll be fun, of course, as you'll get to watch us with the 360 footage. You'll also get to hear us talk. We'll have some mics on, good fun and games, and maybe a small little narration, of course.
You're always encouraged to interact with us. Like, please, we want to talk to you. You, the listener.
You out there, are you listening? Is anybody out there?
Sorry,
Maybe
that
I-
sounded really desperate.
oh goodness.
No, we've got a good group here, and of course, we'll be having a lot of fun on April 28th in the 10K. But we have 2 minutes left, and we got to talk about pets, right?
Oh, I thought we almost forgot.
Oh.
How could you forget about the parapets?
Please tell our
a
audience
name
out there.
with 1 minute now. A name that I had never thought of before. The term parapets. It's fascinating. It's like it's like Paralympics because it's with the Olympics. Para is with. Parapets means a pet of yours that has an impairment. 3-legged cats, visually impaired dog.
Yeah, I have to share that Ryan added us to a Facebook group a few days ago where this was discussed, and there were some
like
real
the top
adorable
news
pictures
in the
of
group.
pets.
Top news, breaking news. Drop everything.
Yes.
Look at this. What was it? A squirrel with like
There were
wheels
some
in
real
his hind
cute
legs.
puppies, too.
But you should join that page. It's open to everybody. Facebook group, Paralympics. We're in it, and even the IPC president is in it. We're big wigs now. But where did Craig Spence go? Where did Craig Spence go? Nobody knows. But he's out there somewhere, maybe even listening. And it's 7 o'clock. We got that in 2 minutes. I feel like an auctioneer.
I think that's appropriate. 2 minutes for parapets.
I guess. So on that note, we'll see you next Friday. Oh my gosh, when we come back next Friday, be the day before the marathon. We might even come back from a so-called pasta feed. Are we doing that?
I figured, why not? I'm not turning
wow,
it down.
You're really putting us on the spot here.
I got a carbo.
I'm
I got a
doing
carbo
it.
load before the race.
I'm doing it, okay? I'm going to eat everything I can before this marathon, and I sit for an hour and a half. Well, I've sat for 8 hours today, so not that much different. But on that note, we'll see you next week for Rowan Lennox on WPGU 1071 and UPTV. James Boyd, Will Gerard, Ryan Wilson, and Emily Polk
Was once with us.
was once with us. Shout out to her. See you next week.